Menstruation, your period, Aunt Flo, women's trouble, that time of the month, coming into womanhood, the crimson wave, the red badge of courage, flying your colors, the invasion of the Red Army, riding the cotton pony. Full stop. I have a feeling I may have lost the male demographic already. For something so little discussed, it has so many names. Menstruation has long been taboo across many cultures, with women's cycles regarded as everything from inconvenient to unclean. With the creation and evolution of various feminine hygiene products, a term which itself frames women as being in need of sanitation, the big red taboo remains, only now with brightly colored packaging and laughably unrealistic advertisements of blissfully happy menstruating women. With the introduction of tampons in the 1930s, a new level of freedom was afforded to menstruating women everywhere. Or so they were told. Underneath the sanitized imagery of these apparently revolutionary devices remains the interrelated and often neglected questions. Are tampons vegan? And are they even safe? Hi, it's Emily from Bite-Size Vegan, and welcome to another Vegan Nugget. When I started researching for this topic, I figured it would be a relatively simple video to throw together. 20 plus hours later, I found myself deep in a US patent document from 1997, tracing down various horrific tampon safety experiments from the 1980s. Starting with the obligatory Google search, I found a lot of people asking about the vegan status of tampons, but only uncertainty and vague supposition in response. Certainly, they couldn't be tested on animals. I mean, how would that even work? As I dug further into the legal history of tampon regulation and litigation, I realized that this video needed to encompass more than a simple yes or no. Today we'll be looking at three interconnected aspects of the tampon issue: women's health, animal testing, and environmental impact. Though this topic bleeds into many other areas as well, couldn't help myself, including important women's rights issues. We'll spend a good bit of time on the health aspect because it lays the groundwork for both the animal testing and environmental impact aspects, and is incredibly vital information for women and girls to have. You can find chapter markers for navigation in the video description. I will have a list of resources along with citations to everything I state available on the blog post for this video if you want to delve deeper. This is a rich and complex subject that one could spend a week every month investigating and still have more to learn. Moving on. Feminine hygiene products are marketed as synonymous with feminine health, but are they, and tampons in particular, really in a woman's best interest? When it comes to the health impact of tampons, there are three main variables: the ingredients, the absorbency level, and the bleaching process. Each of these relates to two main health concerns: toxic shock syndrome and dioxin exposure. To address each of these, we need a brief history of the little cotton rockets. Things have come a long way since the belted-on cotton rag contraptions of old. But really, tampons aren't as new as you may think. Introduced commercially in Europe in the 1930s, they didn't reach wide acceptance in the United States until around 1974, due to puritanical concerns that they threatened the integrity of a woman's virginity. In 1974, Procter & Gamble released the Rely brand tampon, and American women joined their European counterparts in revolutionizing that time of the month. Because what woman doesn't want an assurance of daintiness she's never known before, while doubled over in pain as her uterus plays out its personal Armageddon? As early as 1975, anecdotal evidence arose connecting toxic shock syndrome to tampon use. Toxic shock syndrome, or TSS, is a rare but potentially fatal medical condition caused by toxins produced by a bacterium and characterized by fever, headache, nausea and vomiting, diarrhea, confusion, low blood pressure, rash, and sometimes seizures, among other symptoms. Regardless of this disturbing connection to their products, tampon companies didn't investigate for 5 years, and only then, when confronted by the Center for Disease Control and forced to pay damages to affected women. Finding that the companies had literally no information about the effects of their products on vaginal physiology and microbiology, the CDC undertook its own tests and within 3 to 4 weeks had established that TSS was caused by a particular toxin secreted by a particular bacterial strain known as Staphylococcus aureus. In the summer of 1980, the CDC recommended warnings be issued with tampons, a regulation which went into formal effect in 1982 and remains today, as well as cautioned women that if they wanted to avoid the risk of TSS, to stop using tampons. The CDC report also found that Procter & Gamble's Rely tampons carried the highest risk for TSS. Rely tampons were uniquely composed of carboxymethylcellulose and compressed beads of polyester, while other companies utilized a blend of cotton and rayon.
It's totally different from any other tampon. See, Rely is made of two materials. Each has advantages of its own, but combined, they're even better.
Originally, tampons were 100% cotton, but in an effort to combat leakage, companies increased absorbency by introducing blends of synthetic fibers, including polyester, polyacrylate rayon, carboxymethylcellulose, and viscose rayon. With the rise of TSS cases, all but cotton and rayon were phased out. While the Food and Drug Administration insists that rayon is safe, experts like Dr. Philip Tierno, Director of Microbiology and Diagnostic Immunology at New York University Medical Center, insists that 100% cotton tampons present the lowest risk. But before you run out to purchase a small cotton plantation for residents in your nether regions, it's important to note that cotton is the dirtiest crop on the planet, occupying only 2.4% of the world's cropland, but using 16 to 25% of the world's pesticides. Aldicarb, for example, a pesticide commonly used in cotton production, is so toxic that a single drop absorbed through the skin can kill an adult human. And let's not forget Lauren Wassar, the model who at 24 years old had her right leg amputated due to toxic shock syndrome contracted from Kotex Natural Balance cotton tampons. Though she's now doing excellent work challenging and redefining beauty standards. But tampon ingredients aren't the only factor. In 1980, two influential studies were published which indicated that tampon absorbency rating was a greater risk factor for TSS than tampon ingredients, with the risk rising with absorbency level. The FDA sprung into action and 4 years later proposed the creation of federal regulations for absorbency standards. After only another 5 years of lively back and forth with industry leaders, the FDA finally released their rulings for ranges of absorbency labeling for menstrual tampons on October 26, 1989. Made it in under a decade. Well done. While women could now take comfort in the uniformity of tampon absorbency levels, it was still impossible for them to know exactly what they were putting in their bodies. As early as 1982, the FDA was asked to require ingredients labelings for tampons due to growing customer concerns. But despite the advice of its own obstetrics and gynecology devices panel, it refused to do so. For a product that has such prolonged and intimate contact with one of the most sensitive and absorbent parts of the body, the non-disclosure of ingredients is unsettling at best. Because the FDA classifies tampons as medical devices, companies are under no obligation to reveal what is in their tampons, which leads us to the second major health concern: dioxin exposure in relation to the bleaching process of tampon production. Dioxins are a group of chemically related compounds that are persistent environmental pollutants, which, due to their fat solubility, accumulate and remain in the body for 7 to 11 years. According to the World Health Organization, dioxins are highly toxic and can cause reproductive and developmental problems, damage the immune system, interfere with hormones, and also cause cancer. While the majority of dioxins that people come into contact with are through meat, dairy, fish, and shellfish consumption, they are also a byproduct of the chlorine bleaching process used in the manufacture of paper products, including the rayon and tampons. In 1987, an FDA scientist stated that it is critical to an adequate risk assessment that the level of dioxins in tampons, sanitary pads, diapers, and other medical devices be measured. The capacity to measure such levels exists within FDA extraction. Data for dioxins from these products would improve the accuracy of any risk assessment. Yet, the FDA again refused the advice of its own people, saying that there wasn't adequate data on dioxins to warrant labeling. Later in 1990, along with the EPA and Consumer Product Safety Commission, the FDA authored a study of risks related to products containing chlorine-bleached wood pulp and found the dioxin levels to be negligible. However, numerous specialists disagreed with their conclusion. One particularly firm voice was that of House Representative Carolyn B. Maloney, who introduced a bill on November 7, 1997, proposing an act entitled the Tampon Safety and Research Act of 1997. The act provided for research to determine the extent to which the presence of dioxin, synthetic fibers, and other additives in menstrual tampons pose any risk to the health of women. Sadly, Maloney's act was not passed. But, ever persistent, she resubmitted it in 1999, 2003, 2005, 2008, 2011, 2014, and 2015. now calling it the Robin Danielson Act, after a woman who died from TSS in 1998. An important element of Maloney's argument remains that the FDA itself doesn't monitor dioxin levels, but rather relies on companies to self-monitor and submit reports. Because if ever there were someone the honor system was made for, it's faceless multi-billion-dollar corporations. The dioxin levels found to be negligible by these organizations are based on one tampon, negating the accumulation within the body. Maloney compares this to basing the health of smoking on one cigarette. While tampon companies have moved from the original chlorine gas bleaching methods to either elemental chlorine-free bleaching or totally chlorine-free bleaching, most manufacturers use the former, which still produces dioxins. Now I know what you must be thinking. Okay, I get it. Tampons are toxic, infection-filled cancer sticks for my naughty bits. It's a tampon-spiracy. But what's that got to do with veganism? I'm so glad you asked. Well, with all the aforementioned safety issues, scientists of course realized that the only way to keep women safe from the great white threat was to torture and kill mice, rabbits, chickens, rats, hamsters, guinea pigs, monkeys, sheep, goats, and baboons. Because nothing says feminine daintiness like brutal vivisection. While I've always had to dig down several layers to get to the substantial studies when I've researched animal testing for particular products like medication, cigarettes, or what have you, there's always been some readily accessible information with which to start. This was not the case with tampons. Outside of questions and debates on vegan forums and a totally uncited excerpt posted and reposted on vegan Tumblrs, I couldn't find specific information on how or even if tampons are tested on animals. However, much like nature's gift to women, I'm nothing if not persistent. I eventually found my way to a document for US patent number 5641503A for additives to tampons, filed on January 13, 1995 and published June 24, 1997, on behalf of McNeil PPC Incorporated, owned by the more widely known Johnson & Johnson. This document described several experiments, giving me just enough to search out the original papers as a starting place. Now, I'm not sure the difficulty of finding such studies was purposeful, but it was certainly in the best interest of tampon producers everywhere. I'll briefly describe some choice examples of the very un-vegan side of tampons, but do refer to the blog post for links to additional and more thorough examples. And I won't be showing anything graphic. The studies were hard enough to find, let alone photos. To start, almost every experiment I encountered, whether using live animals or not, at least employed the use of rabbit's blood and either bovine brain heart agar, which is exactly what it sounds like, or some sort of beef heart medium, with several also employing sheep erythrocytes and one using fetal calf serum. A rather unique study incubated fertilized hens' eggs for 11 days and then injected the live chicken embryos with toxic shock syndrome toxin 1, known as TSST1. The embryos were then, quote, examined for death 24 hours after the injection. Rabbit models for tampon safety come in several variations. Some rabbits received multiple intradermal injections into their back of the TSS toxin over a period of 7 weeks, at which point, quote, the rabbits were bled. One experiment described strapping the rabbits into a rack for 4 hours to acclimate them so they'd fight less when restrained for injection. Then their deaths were recorded and surviving rabbits were observed after 4 days for gross myocardial and liver necrosis. Some were also given endotoxins to determine their susceptibility to lethal shock. Other methods implanted subcutaneous diffusion chambers under the rabbit's skin for a steady release of toxins. One such experiment included that their diffusion chambers were made of perforated polyethylene golf balls. Yet other rabbits had 4 diffusion chambers implanted in their uteruses, releasing toxins directly into their wombs. The chambers were recovered at the time of death or after 14 days when the experiment was terminated, at which time all remaining rabbits were killed and dissected. Some rabbits endured the repeated vaginal insertion of actual tampons laced with live TSST-positive bacteria. In one such experiment, rabbits had an infected tampon inserted and left for 4 hours before having it removed in the process repeated with a sterile tampon, and then again with a third that was left in for 14 to 16 hours to simulate overnight usage. Menstruation was simulated by injecting a mixture of rabbit blood and bovine serum albumin into the rabbits' vaginas once the tampons were in place. Perhaps the most bizarre iteration was an experiment where tampons were inserted subcutaneously into the tissue on the back of the rabbits' necks. The forced vaginal insertion of toxin-laced tampons was also inflicted upon baboons, with one experiment leaving them in for 12 hours at a time to allow for additional growth of Staphylococcus aureus and TSST1 production within the vaginal cavity. Guinea pigs also received intravaginal inoculations of the TSS toxin and other associated strains in an experiment carried out at a university 15 minutes from where I currently live. One report used terminology I've never before seen in a scientific paper, stating that the rabbits who hadn't already died were, quote, sacrificed for dissection, a term which actually captures rather simply the main argument for animal testing, namely that it's a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. I have an entire video series on animal testing delving into this argument and more, but a summary review on toxic shock syndrome research from within the scientific community itself, and one that's in favor of continued experimentation, says it better than I ever could. That Staphylococcus aureus strains produce a wide number of extracellular products, which cause severe biologic effects in some animals, makes it difficult to confirm that symptoms noted in animals given TSST1 or infected with TSST1 producing strains are specific for TSS in humans. Basically meaning, because these are mice, rabbits, rats, hamsters, guinea pigs, monkeys, sheep, goats, and baboons, and not humans, the results can't be relied upon as indicators of human reactions. So, what was the point? Well, the report assures us that, nonetheless, most animal model data relating to the effects of TSST1 strongly supports its role as the most prominent toxin causing TSS. Excellent. Now we know that the toxic shock syndrome toxin number 1 is the most prominent cause of toxic shock syndrome. I'm sure every one of those beings who was injected, cut into, raped with toxin-laced tampons, and sacrificed can rest easy knowing that their invaluable contribution to science was not in vain. While most of the scientific experiments I described were from the 80s and 90s, with a few in the 2000s, this kind of experimentation continues today all over the world, right in our own backyards. Now, if what we've covered already isn't reason enough to ditch the little toxic seeds of vaginal destruction, let's briefly look into the environmental impact of our monthly visitor. The average woman will throw away 250 to 300 pounds of menstruation products, including as many as 16,800 tampons in her lifetime. While both tampons and pads leach chemicals, including dioxins, into the water and soil, tampons in particular are a major hazard to marine life. The buoyant applicators can float out for miles and are often eaten by marine wildlife, becoming lodged in their digestive tracts, causing them to slowly starve to death. Some also contain bisphenol A, an endocrine disruptor, proven to have harmful effects on aquatic wildlife. Used tampons and pads can harbor harmful pathogens and bacteria, and their decomposition in landfills is unlikely to impossible, with a 2005 study showing tampons to be the slowest to degrade of all paper or cotton products. I think it's safe to say after all of this that mainstream tampons are decidedly not vegan and very, very likely not safe. So, what's a girl to do when the uterine ninjas arrive? Well, luckily there are alternatives which I have links to on the blog post. There are several brands of 100% organic cotton tampons which sidesteps the toxic chemicals of conventional cotton and the questionable effects of rayon, though still can contribute to pollution even if labeled biodegradable. The ones I have listed on the blog post have clear, no animal testing policies. An alternative that checks all of the boxes is a menstrual cup, which, believe it or not, even predates the tampon, with the first known concept arising in 1867. Though distributed since the 1930s, menstrual cups have not seen the same success as tampons, possibly in part because of their lack of built-in obsolescence, meaning most of the companies are small and independently run. Options include the Keeper, the Diva Cup, and more. Additionally, for your pads, as they are composed of the same questionable materials and toxins, and just as environmentally destructive, there are reusable cloth options like Glad Rags and Luna pads with organic non-bleached options. Both the cups and reusable pads have had to struggle against societal norms and menstruation taboos, as they require a bit more intimacy with your own anatomy. But when you think of your health, the needless torture of animals, and the destruction of the planet and its marine life, getting a little more acquainted with your private parts seems a small price to pay. And since cups and cloth last for years, you actually save money. I hope that this video has been helpful. It's far longer than I originally envisioned, but in seeing how very little reliable information is out there on this topic, I really wanted to be thorough. Menstruation is nothing to be ashamed of or secretive about. Just like the importance of exposing the animal products industries, it's only when we shine a light on what's hidden that we can know what we are supporting and choose to make different decisions from here on out. The time it took to produce this video clocks in at about... If you want to help support Bite Size Vegan, so I can keep putting in the long hours to bring you this educational resource, please check out the support links in the video description below, where you can give a one-time donation or receive perks and rewards for your support by joining the Nugget Army. The link for that is also in the iCard sidebar. I'd also like to give a special thanks to my 50 and above patrons and my whole Patreon family for making this and all of my videos possible. You are beyond awesome-tastic. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this red-hot report. Did you know this information about tampons? What alternatives do you use or think that you'd like to try in place of those treacherous tomes of toxic death? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it around to help inform other women and girls. If you're new here, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button down there for more awesome vegan content every Monday, Wednesday, and some Fridays. Now go live vegan, ride the crimson wave on the cotton pony, and I'll see you soon.
I just discovered something great. It's Rely, a new tampon from Procter & Gamble. It's really different and better. Really a better tampon. Remember, they named it Rely.
If you use Rely tampons, here's an important message from Procter & Gamble. Women who use Rely tampons should stop using them and return any unused product to Procter & Gamble for a refund. Procter & Gamble has suspended the sale of Rely tampons. This action has been taken until more is known about a new disease called toxic shock syndrome. Some studies suggest that Rely tampons increase the risk more than other tampon brands. We advise you to stop using Rely tampons.
Remember, they named it Rely.